Welcome to Dan's On Site with Dan Dutton and Dan Goley, a podcast and YouTube show dedicated to all things real estate, delivering market information, interviews from all perspectives, and tips for everyone involved in or interested in real estate. We'd love to hear from you. Dan's at dansonsite.com. Welcome to Dan's On Site. Hey, do us a favor as we get started here. Like our videos if you would. If you like what we're doing here, subscribe to our videos or podcasts, however you get the show. All that stuff helps us. If you really like what we're doing, maybe write us a review, but I don't want to ask too much.
Or thumbs up.
Thumbs up, like, subscribe, do all this stuff. We very much appreciate it. So last week with TJ has proven to be a really popular show, maybe our most popular show yet. The hours watched far exceed any other videos we put out. What did you think of last week's show with TJ?
Well, we went through and tried to touch about every topic possible when it comes to leadership of a company. It just so happens that TJ's leadership of a commercial real estate company, but inside of that, he touched on the construction side, he touched on property management, which is probably, outside of brokerage being a major impacting part, property management may be the one. I mean, if you look at it and really realize that companies, when you hear on the news that a company is getting shut down for a few days, what does that mean? And we need to sanitize that as heavily property management, especially in a multi-tenanted building where there's more than one tenant, as we say, that, a lot of the stuff that he talked about, I think can be applied really across the board to any leader of any company.
There's no doubt that property management has more direct contact with the people that are experiencing, the businesses experiencing COVID firsthand, more so than brokers do, construction does, anybody else does. And so, yeah, that was really interesting to hear him talk about how property management deals with it. And really, there's nobody better that knows firsthand experiences of a large segment of businesses than property management, because they see everybody.
Well, and it's the time that COVID hit. So, it hit in March when schools are still in, everything clears out. And so now in the next, 30, 60, 90 days as we tape this, we are going to probably bring into the educational or schools or how they're all working. But that period of time from his episode backing up to March really was, how are people surviving? How are companies surviving? How are they dealing with their clients? And I think that is it's just turned out to be a great episode.
It was. And it was really fascinating to get his take on the office market as well.
Yeah.
So this week, no guests this week. We instead decided we're going to take a trip down memory lane, discuss how we got started in real estate and some of our best advice.
Memory's a little tough sometimes with me. The short term might be gone, or
in brokerage, there's a few happy hours that take place. So maybe we don't remember as much as we'd like to. But
it's not a full 24 hours.
And then some of our best advice for those who want to get started in real estate, or maybe young brokers, young real estate people just getting started. So let's jump into it. Dan, how did you get your start in real estate?
My interest going way back was probably when I was a little child. I grew up just north of Westroads Mall, and at that time
in Omaha,
Nebraska.
Maybe
I thought everybody.
Somebody might be outside Omaha that would know.
Well, we do have Ireland followers. We are worldly.
There's multiple countries that check us out.
So we really appreciate all that, in all honesty. But anyways, jokingly aside, Westroads Mall's really on the corner of 680 and Dodge Street. It's really the hub and the activity of what goes on. And as of right now, so when you hear of malls closings and everything else, Westroads is, the one mall that has probably separated himself from all the other ones for closing. It's strong. It's revitalized. I kind of use Westroads Mall. I'm digressing a little bit. But I use Westroads Mall when people say, what is commercial real estate? How does it happen? How does it survive? And we always say, Dan and I have talked about this a lot, is that really on the commercial real estate side, the world evolves. So it's constantly evolving. I can go down the list of the different stores. We used to go to Gizmos, the arcade as a kid. And then there was, all the different restaurants that were around.
We did talk last week about going to the mall as kids and what was there, and then me taking my kids there now, and then be like, why would anybody want to be here?
Yeah. Well, then they went from Gizmos up in the corner, which is probably where, Yonkers is maybe now, and then now the arcade was in the basement and whatever. I'm digressing, but anyways, I was always a kid that was interested in the stores and how they were there, and when you'd walk through the mall and they were doing construction, they would fence off, and they still do today, where it's just basically a construction door, and I was always peeking in, and then then my dad worked at Mutual of Omaha, and we used to go to his office and look out, and I was always when they excited to see all the different construction, and then the dome. He was around in that era as well, and how in the hell can they dig a hole in the ground and build up from there into a dome? So all those things really, really fascinated me, and so as I got along, I kind of fell into it. I don't think I was destined to be into it, but I just kind of came into it one day, and it's really, I've never, I know it sounds cliche. There can't be a day, even though there are struggles near God, you say to yourself, how can I get through the day? But I never wake up and say, I really don't want to go to work.
So what was that first for you? I mean, I'll get into this with myself too, but nobody really tells you how to become a real estate broker. You do kind of fall into it, but what was your first step? What was the first thing you did to go about getting in the real estate industry?
I just talked to friends that were older, friends of the family that were in it, and just talked to them about the industry, how they started. And a lot of it seemed like the theme is, if you have interest, go talk to the experienced people who maybe are on the back into their careers, and use them as mentors. And then from there, I would meet clients and talk to them. So for me, I was always asking and asking and asking.
So you got your real estate license, and where did you go from there?
I went on the commercial side, went into Trent Magid with this World Group. I always joke, I walked in with a client that wanted a purchase agreement and walked out with a job working for him. And it was a situation where he was growing the company at the time, and he knew that it's hard. I mean, it's hard to get brokers. It's hard to have, it's a tough industry. It's not for everyone. But I saw a drive in him that, he needed some help. We kind of clicked immediately and just grew from there. And then really, I'm an old school guy with interest, and I literally would just get in the phone book and open up to a section and just start calling.
Yeah, so when I got started in real estate, I always think back, I was 22. I literally had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I tried a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
That's the fun though. It's blind.
Yeah, I was.
Just as long as you don't offend people, maybe.
I think I had some family members that were a little bit concerned about the not knowing what I was doing with my life.
That's what I like, is the attractiveness to it.
So my grandfather is in real estate, or was in real estate for a long, long time in California. He was back, and we went out to this big family dinner at Applebee's. I mean, because that's how we rolled in Lincoln. Applebee's is a big deal. And I remember him sitting there, and basically it's with my grandfather, it's always 20 questions. How's this going? How's that going? What are you going to do here? What are you going to do there? What? And so I knew it going in, but this one was really guided around like, you're 22. It's time to pick an avenue and at least chase it for a while and see if it's going to work out. What do you want to do? What do you like to do? Well, all that stuff. And he goes, you know what? You ought to get a real estate license and just start in real estate and see where it takes you. And I quit my job, and 3 weeks later I had my real estate license. And of course, what do you do with real estate license once you have it? Well, I had no idea, because my grandfather had gone back to California, and he didn't really give me that part of this. So, but what are the people that come to real estate classes are always residential people. And so I caught on with a residential firm. And I worked there for about a year, and I've told this story a lot. One of my best friends in the world happened to be dating, Randy Lenhoff, who was in charge of Selden Company at the time.
Dating Randy? Or
his daughter, actually. His daughter was dating my buddy. And she mentioned that they needed a commercial real estate agent at Selden. And so I interviewed. I may have had an inside track, but actually I don't know that they had many other people interview. So that was a big part of it too.
That list is long.
Oh boy. Anyway, so I caught on with Selden, and which is good because I wouldn't have lasted much longer in residential. It was not for me. And it's kind of funny. I think commercial firms generally do a much better job getting themselves out there today and recruiting those young brokers, and real estate programs at college, which didn't exist when we were of college age.
I mean, UNO is really the only one. I mean, Creighton's dipping into it a little bit now, but it's hard to find that.
Yeah, but there are at least some nationally that are doing the same thing, but that didn't exist back then. And that gives commercial firms or investment firms, private equity firms, a route to pull young people directly from college and into commercial real estate. I feel like in the past, if you got into commercial real estate, you always stumbled into it. It was almost never done on purpose, unless you had, family. And we certainly know plenty of people that got into real estate because of family.
Well, it's some people ask, well, you have a real estate license, is it residential, and is it the same selling houses that is building? Well, it's different. It's a different mindset. On the residential side, it's more of an emotional purchase. Where's my family safe? Where are the schools going to be? Are we positioned if we have, young children? So it's a lot different mindset than, on the commercial side where, while emotions can get into it if you're a little bit fired up over a deal, on the commercial side, it's more of strategy, planning what makes sense. What does the deal entail if they're going to lease a specific, let's say an office, we're in an office park here, does it make sense? Does all the employees have access to it? It's great for us where we are at on 132nd and Dodge. We can get anywhere on Dodge and we're 15, 20 minutes and anywhere in town. So for us, convenience is a big part of the deal. And so I think a lot of it, it's just a different strategy going into it from there. And, I take the boys or wherever else, we're driving down Dodge Street and I always see the First National Tower. And it's the beauty of our industry is we work on projects that, maybe we're not directly involved with like the First National Tower, but I can always go back and say, I remember standing up on, gosh, I don't even remember what floor it was, but I was certainly above the Woodman Tower. And all that was in there was, we were doing a tour, the floor was poured and there's this little wire about, yay big circulating, and we were all in hard hats and you would lean on the corner and look down. And I went to the foreman at the time that was there. I'm like, how do you keep people from safe? I mean, it was just winds wailing through there. And he goes, look where everybody is. Everybody's scared, kind of, has this little fear, and they're all close to the elevator shaft, which is right in the middle of it all. And, I just remember that story. I remember that they, put, to make sure it was straight, they had laser beams in Iowa and then south in Bellevue and West Omaha and way north, that far back to shoot it to make sure it's going straight. So it's the stories you can tell on the commercial side, and how things have grown, and, you remember when it was built. Some people like the stories, I think, not all, but that's really what kind of, keeps me interested in it.
It is neat to look at a project that becomes a significant landmark in your city and say, sometimes you did have a significant part to play. Sometimes you had a very minor role to play. But either way, it's fun. And of course, I don't think my wife likes to hear about the stories as much as I do.
Fairly certain 7 out of 10 have dialed me out right when I start to tell it.
Right. But it is fun and it is neat to hear about or think about. So we both lived professionally through 2008. And we remember, unfortunately in great detail, what it was like to be in 2008. What was your memories during 2008 and the Great Recession, the financial crisis, all that?
Well, what I remember is the conversations. And I think any broker that, started in maybe 2010 to today really heard stories about the '08, even though it took a few years to get out of there. The difference now is the banks are more flush. They have more cash. And the stories are different. Back in '08, you didn't know who was going to lose their job, who was going to lose their house. I mean, some banks. I mean, it was almost just like it was a different bloodbath maybe than today. But I remember back then it was kind of its own pandemic, because even though there was 01, a little blip and some blips in the 90s, '08 it was almost like a clearinghouse. And really the conversations, and I didn't have any knowledge of that. You know, I didn't live through the 90s and everything else, and you know the stories you hear on the old ones, but it was just a bloodbath, and the conversations were just completely different than what they are today.
Well, in '08, I was 28. And so I've been in the real estate as a broker for about 5 years, give or take. And they always say, 5 years is what it takes to get once you hit 5 years, you can kind of, not that you won't ever want to coast, but you built your business, you can make it long-term from there on out. And really, I was at 26, 27, leading up, I was making more money than I even thought was ever possible for me personally. And my career was going great, and I was in love with everything going on. And then '08 hit, and it was really a smack to the face.
Oh, it's kicking the knees.
Big bat to the face. But the thing I always remember about '08 is having lunch with bankers, and bankers sitting there looking at you across from the table and saying, we can't lend. We either can't get our hands on money to lend, or the federal government is specifically telling us we can't lend money. And then I remember going home and seeing, not to get ultra political here, but going home and seeing government officials at the very highest levels of our federal government saying, we're sitting here telling banks to lend money. We're telling them to give away money. We're telling this. And then you'd have another lunch with another banker who would tell you the exact same thing the banker 2 days before told you, we can't lend. And the federal government won't let us lend. And so I don't know that anybody actually knew the truth. I don't know that the bankers fully knew what they were or weren't able to do, or how liquid they could be. And I'm sure that the federal government didn't really understand what was going on with banks at the time. But for the rest of us who weren't operating in that field or that field, the rest of us needed both to get along, to put cash into the market. And as we talk about today and COVID and what's happening, that's the biggest difference, right? And we've said this many times, is banks do have money and they are lending money, and the government is very much trying to force money into the marketplace. Now, that money is going to go through the marketplace and be pulled back out somewhere along the line. And so the question is now, as we sit on August, 20th or whatever, as we move into September and that money's flowed out, if the government doesn't push more money into the marketplace, our business is going to start to fail at a higher rate than they did 3 months ago. And are we going to start to see some more similarities to '08? Because I'm not sure right now we have that many similarities.
No, I mean, I was with some people over the weekend, and they were saying, oh my gosh, your business has to be down, and all these places closing and all that sort of stuff. And I always come back with the answer of, yes, you hear the news stories and everything else, and in large part they're accurate. I'm not saying they're inaccurate. I'm not saying anything against news medias, but I think here in Nebraska, especially the Midwest, you have to dial that back in a little bit, and you have to really look at it a little bit tighter and know kind of a bigger story. Sure, it's amazing when I watch TV and you have Times Square where there's no one walking,
right?
Where Victoria's Secret or whatever it is, I heard the other day, is paying like $1 million a month in rent. I mean, that's a stinger when there's no one on the streets. Around here, if you dial it back in, some of the places that have closed, unfortunately, in most of them, I would say, have had some sort of landlord assistance, have probably had the writing on the wall that maybe in the next 12 months or 24 months, they were going dark anyway.
Significant trouble.
And so this just fast-tracked those people. And I think that's kind of the first wave. That the PPP are maybe held on for a month or so for them, but the reality is, that they were going dark. And I know you and I, we worked with some national people before the pandemic, national clients, that, you and I would look into and try and figure out maybe if there's some corporations that were downsizing, or maybe they were going to, merge a couple different concepts into one. And so that's how we found vacancies. And now I think some of the landlords are starting to come to us and saying, look, this is coming, and they're tipping us off and saying we may need help here in the next 60 to 90 days and keep your radar out.
Well, and let's not forget, The vacancy means opportunity for real estate brokers.
Well, yeah.
And so,
Or the ambulance chasers.
yeah, we are a little.
Theory.
In some ways, we are. Now, it's not necessarily great for landlords.
Hurt.
Or banks down the road. But as real estate brokers, vacancy does. And truthfully, before COVID hit, we were seeing in some sectors all-time low vacancy rates. Even in retail, people love to crush retail, but we were seeing some really low vacancy rates. And if you got a new restaurant to town that was looking for space, it wasn't easy to find them Class A space, and sometimes it wasn't easy to find Class B space. And so that's one thing these downturns do create is opportunities, not only for brokers, but maybe better for the businesses, successful businesses who want to take advantage of those opportunities.
Well, and it's, you just said it. I mean, we'd have people come in and say, I want to open up 6 or 8 locations in Omaha, and we'd say, where? And I think Omaha and Nebraska, really in general, in the Midwest, I mean, you can wrap all the way to Des Moines most likely, and you see that, we weren't the trailblazers of getting out ahead of it and hoping that people will come. But everybody now, especially the lenders, and they've gotten smart from '08, they're requiring that 50 and 60% occupied before they even throw a stake in the ground.
Yeah, they really do. And '08 has, I think, taught everybody some lessons. And truthfully, while maybe pre-COVID, I was starting to wonder if we were starting to forget some of those lessons, I actually think for the most part, we've remembered the lessons that '08 has taught us. It's not that long ago. And COVID is kind of actually reinforcing a lot of people those lessons they've learned, and they've buckled down. One thing we did as, not that either one of us is old by any means, well,
young at heart.
Don't mind the gray hair, I guess. But anyway, one thing we did, we tried to speak to the younger brokers here about our experiences in '08, and maybe it hasn't, like we said, proven out to be the same situation, but we could at least say, hey, we went through this crisis. Here's how we move forward. And maybe as we the last question that we talk about here is best advice for, on our sheet, I said young brokers, but it's probably anybody that's, let's say under 30 in the real estate business, or maybe people that have been in the real estate business for less than 5 years. What was some of that advice that you gave to people leading into COVID? And just generally, what's your best advice? I realize those are two different things, but generally, what's your best advice for young real estate professionals?
Well, it's the same word, and we've touched on it, I think, about every episode, is communication. And I think before COVID, pre-COVID, we just tell them. I mean, the world today is texting and emailing. And I think in the younger brokers coming out is that communication maybe is going to be the biggest challenge. Before cell phones, and we're not that old to know that, cell phones weren't around, but I mean, it was how we were brought up, or how I was brought up is, the phone was your source of communication if it wasn't face-to-face.
Yeah.
And so it's keeping up with that communication. And I think pre-COVID is to learn those opportunities I just mentioned is, are there anything coming up? And then when COVID hit, there was a period of time, probably 30 days or so, where we asked ourselves the question, are we too insensitive to call and talk? And so I think people kind of stayed back and was a little bit more careful with the conversations. But when I talk to them, I still say you have to call and just listen. We've had some where we called right early on. I mean, they would just unload.
What did we find out when we called a client? We found out they really wanted to talk. Because they weren't in the office. They didn't have anybody to bounce ideas off of. They didn't have anybody to listen to their complaints.
Absolutely.
And they're like, oh, wow, my real estate broker's calling me. I can do all these things to them, and they'll at least listen to me and understand. And maybe if I need to provide a little bit of advice. But we absolutely found people wanted to talk.
They just talked. I mean, and it was actually refreshing because, we were going through pain because there wasn't as many deals. They, as some of the investor people, they were going through some pain because we weren't bringing them new deals, and they may be losing. I mean, fortunately for us, we didn't have a lot of collapsing deals that during COVID. We didn't really lose out on many deals. Postponed, maybe delayed, yes, but not completely falling out. I can remember one. But I think, which was a stinger, or two, actually two. And so there were stingers. but we'll go way past that. And you know, I mean, it was good to have at least conversations, and I think where it's going to make us stronger coming out of the back end of this is that we talked to them, and I talked to a couple clients yesterday, and it's just continuing conversation on where's the market going, and we're doing leases. There's tours that are starting to kick back up. People are more comfortable wearing masks, and you know, the younger brokers, the best thing for them is they never went through a 2008 in some ways, because this is all new to them. And so if you turn it into more of a positive reaction, saying, hey, listen, this is only going to make you stronger.
So I want to go back to communication for one quick second, because I think there's talking about communication during the pandemic and how important it was to touch base with people who are now stuck at home. And if you're like me, not that my wife is wonderful in every single way, but she doesn't want to hear about things that are happening in my job because she doesn't fully understand them. And I need to vent to coworkers or to people that understand. And so there's that. But, you know, in today's world, having been, you know, when I started in the real estate business, emails did exist. Text messaging, I suppose, did exist too, but you never sent a professional text message. That was off. You didn't do it. Wasn't acceptable. But even with emails, and sometimes you do write long emails to try to cover a bunch of things, and you do that to make sure it's in writing or whatever, but there is something lost in text that is not the same as speaking to somebody either over the phone or directly. I guess maybe if you're William Shakespeare or one of the great writers of all time, you can.
It's not going to be me.
Yeah, it's not going to be me either. So in text messages, while they are acceptable professionally in a lot of ways now, and they certainly allow you to get that quick connection with somebody and that super quick response, there's almost always something lost in text messages. And that's why I think most of my text messages are like, quick hit, let's get on a call. Because you're not going to read my 80 paragraph text message, which what do you have to be?
I certainly wouldn't.
No, right.
I'd be lost after 5 seconds and be like, I'm just going to call you.
But you can't, you have to get on the phone for that. And I think what I try to tell young people is real estate gets in the blood. It is really hard once you start in this industry to get out of the industry, because real estate, like we talked about before, you become a part of a project, you know, for as long as that building exists, you were part of what made that building possible.
Certain pride about it. I mean, you're just full of pride that you know your success. I mean, we have some down ones, we have some hit and misses, but you remember those too. You know, I drive by those all the time. I don't want to talk about them because I'll remember them, but you're like, if I would have just done this, I could have had that.
The flexibility that this career provides, I don't know of many other careers that provide you the flexibility. Now, on the other side of that is, it means like this last weekend, I spent an amazing amount of time working, and I was out doing showings, meeting clients, having not great conversations with people all weekend long. And while on commercial, that's maybe rarer than it is in residential, it's still something happens. So I always kind of say, you know, what hours do you work? The answer is kind of all of them.
Always.
So
Real
there
estate
is
never
that
sleeps.
side. But like, you know, today maybe I need to leave at 2:00 and go do some family stuff. I'll do that. And there's no questions asked, and I'm not worried about it, and nobody else is either. So that flexibility is really special too. So I guess before we wrap up the show, any last parting advice you give to the community?
Well, if you're a investor, landlord, anybody like that that's just wants to talk or get another opinion, we'd certainly love to talk to you. I think that, you know, it's important for us to understand where the community's at. And I think, you know, it's not just a deal structure, it's just understanding conversation. And I think that's a lot of the stuff that we've, you know, really learned through this whole COVID episode that is still ongoing, unfortunately, is just communication, because every single day is brand new. I mean, the testing has changed, you know, so what does that mean? And so how does that impact us on the commercial side? Well, there's testing sites in parking lots. And so we've had conversation with people that want to rent parking lots. So this whole world of COVID is ever evolving. Nobody's an expert on it at all. And I think, if we just constantly stay talking to each other, maybe there's some reassuring that can happen out of it, and I think we'll all be a lot better.
There's no doubt. Communication, the subtopic of every Dan's on Site.
I'm trying to find a new word, but I mean, it keeps coming back to it.
It absolutely does keep coming back. And I would say, if you're young, if you're in college or maybe not quite to college or just out of college and you're thinking a real estate career might be right for you, reach out. Dan's at dansonsite.com. We would love to at least point you in the right direction. Not sure that we can always provide the guidance you maybe need or are looking for, but we can at least point you in the right direction of who to talk to or what to do. And the other idea is there's lots of different aspects of this career. We are real estate brokers, but I've been an asset manager too. And an asset manager is, a lot of times spent mostly in the office and a little bit out in the field. And you're looking at financials and spreadsheets all day long, and you're trying to plan for goals to hit and then make sure the owners are getting the money that you told them you get for them. And there's property managers, and property managers are, they spend a lot of time in the field at very specific properties. They have a lot of direct contact with tenants that are under lease. There's facilities people who are kind of like a property manager, but then they also have some maintenance elements to their job too. And then you can get into financial analysis where people are creating underwriting to see how projects will perform. And, and then of course there's developers, there's owners, there's investors, there's a million different ways. And honestly, we'd love to see everybody get involved whatever way they want. I read real quickly before I end, I read a story, and I don't remember the exact percentage now, but real estate if you take all of real estate and put it together as a sector of the GDP, it makes up like half of the GDP or more than half of the GDP. So really, at the end of the day, real estate, to a certain degree, is the engine that makes the United States run. And so we want to be proactive in promoting that community. And I would also say that's part of why we started the Facebook group. It's Real Estate On Site. Go on Facebook, join the Facebook group. Let's build this community. Let's be proactive and supportive of each other and see how far we can take this whole thing.
Yeah, and if anybody else in the same industry, anybody's in the commercial real estate industry, any state, county, wherever you are, please reach out to us, because we like to share your ideas too. And you can certainly use ours, and hopefully it's of help. But any conversation, anything you have to add, we want to hear it. So we want to hear from you, and we'd be happy to share it. And I think, with this horrible thing that we're going through right now, I think we'll all be a lot better if we all are communicating, as we say, and on the same page.
Be honest, networking is 101 in this business, and we'd love to network with you and get to know you. So reach out. We'd love to talk to you, maybe even have you on the show, to be honest.
Absolutely.
So thanks again for joining us today. As always, you can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, all those, YouTube. But of course, new website,
dansonsite.com. DANS, just like you see on behind us. ONSITE.com.
So do us a favor, give us a like, subscribe, put a review, even if it's maybe not a good review, throw it out there.
We'll learn from everything.
We'll take them all. So as always, I'm Dan Dutton. This is Dan Goley. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks again for joining us. Find us on Facebook, at YouTube, Dan's On Site. All your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. We would love it if you hit the subscribe button and also leave us a review. Reach us at dansonsite.com.